Ethan didn't think much of the cheap secondhand phone when he first bought it. He'd found it at a pawn shop on the outskirts of town, sitting in a dusty glass case among cracked tablets and outdated cameras. The price was too good to pass up. His old phone had been shutting down randomly, and he needed something reliable for work. The shopkeeper said it had been dropped off just a few days before, barely used, fully functional. No scratches on the screen, no dents on the case. Almost too perfect. Ethan remembered turning the device over in his hand, noticing how smooth it felt, how strangely heavy despite its slim design. He joked to the shopkeeper that it looked brand new. The man had simply shrugged and muttered something about people trading in things they didn't want to keep. Ethan hadn't thought much about it. He powered on in the store, checked the settings, and confirmed it worked. No previous user accounts, no photos, no files. A clean slate. That night, sitting alone in his apartment, Ethan transferred over his contacts and apps, treating it like any other phone. He didn't know then that the phone was far from ordinary, that within hours, it would begin showing him something no device should ever be able to show. The first strange occurrence happened around 11:37 p.m. He was brushing his teeth, preparing to sleep, when the phone lit up on the nightstand. He hadn't set any alarms. No one should have been messaging him at that hour. Still, the screen glowed. A notification banner slid across the top. New message. August 15th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. Ethan froze, toothbrush halfway to his mouth. He squinted. That didn't make sense. The date was tomorrow. At least, he thought it was tomorrow. He checked the calendar app. Yes, today was August 14th. But the phone claimed the message was from the following day, down to the exact minute. Curious more than afraid, Ethan unlocked the phone. The message sat in a plain text bubble with no sender name, no number, no profile photo. Just a white bubble on a black background. The words read, "Don't go outside tomorrow night. Whatever you do, don't answer the knock." The toothbrush slipped from Ethan's mouth, clattering into the sink. A shiver went through him, not because of what the message said, but because of how impossible it was. He blinked several times, reread the words, and tried to reason with himself. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe the phone had been jailbroken before, left with some weird residual code. Maybe a prankster had set up scheduled texts. But there was no sender, no contact, just the message. He set the phone down, climbed into bed, and stared at the dark ceiling for a long time. He told himself he wouldn't think about it, that it was meaningless. Still, when he drifted into sleep, the words followed him into his dreams. The next day passed uneventfully. Ethan went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, and grabbed coffee during lunch. By evening, he had almost forgotten about the strange text. He reminded himself that pawn shops sometimes sold refurbished devices, and maybe this one had some glitch from an old owner. That was all. But when the clock in his apartment ticked toward 11:37 p.m., Ethan found himself staring at the phone again. He wasn't expecting anything, but a nervous energy built in his chest. And then, right on time, the phone lit up. The timestamp showed August 16th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. Again, one day ahead. The message read, "Don't trust the man in the elevator." Ethan's mouth went dry. The man in the elevator? He rode the elevator in his building every morning. He knew most of the neighbors, at least by face. Was this some elaborate prank? Someone tracking him? He checked the settings again, scrolling through the phone's menus for signs of third-party apps, malware, or anything out of place. But the system looked clean. No hidden apps, no extrañe permissions. He even reset the device, wiping everything. That night, he hardly slept. The following morning, August 15th, he left his apartment with the message gnawing at the back of his mind. He almost took the stairs, but the building was 9 floors tall, and his office bag was heavy. He told himself it was absurd to avoid the elevator just because of some phantom text. When the door slid open, a man in a gray suit was already inside, holding a briefcase. Ethan had seen him before, one of the quieter residents on the 6th floor. They exchanged polite nods. The doors closed. The elevator hummed as it descended. For the first few seconds, everything was normal. Then the man turned slightly, meeting Ethan's eyes with a strangely blank expression. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't look away. Just stared. Ethan forced a polite smile, then shifted his gaze to the floor indicator above the door. The elevator rattled, lights flickering once before stabilizing. Ethan's pulse quickened. When the doors finally opened at the lobby, Ethan hurried out, almost too quickly, mumbling a rushed "have a good day" without looking back. The man didn't respond. At work, Ethan couldn't focus. He replayed the ride in his mind, convinced there was something unnatural about the way the man had looked at him. Blank, almost hollow, as if he were only imitating what a person should look like. That evening, Ethan decided he would leave the phone powered off. If there was no message, there would be nothing to worry about. So at 11:30, he set it face down, powered it off, and went to bed. But at exactly 11:37, the phone lit up anyway. Ethan bolted upright. The screen glowed bright in the dark, though he hadn't touched it. The timestamp, August 17th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message, "You won't be alone in your apartment tomorrow night." Ethan's chest tightened. He immediately checked the lock on his door, double-checked the windows, and even looked inside the closets, trying to reassure himself. But nothing was out of place. The next day dragged by in a haze of paranoia. He jumped at every sound in the office, checked behind him on the street, and hesitated before unlocking his own apartment door that evening. He told himself this had to be a hoax. Maybe someone had rigged the phone remotely, using it to frighten him. But how would they know where he lived? Night fell quickly. The silence in his apartment felt heavier than usual, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of pipes. Ethan sat on the couch with the phone beside him, too nervous to even turn on the television. As 11:37 approached, every hair on his body stood on end. He didn't want to look, but his eyes kept flicking to the phone. When the time came, the screen stayed black. No glow, no buzz, no message. Ethan exhaled slowly, half laughing at himself for being so wound up. Maybe it had stopped. Maybe the reset had finally wiped whatever strange program was causing it. But then came the knock. 3 soft raps against his apartment door. Ethan's blood ran cold. His phone remained dark, but the warning from the first night blared in his head. Don't answer the knock. He sat frozen, muscles rigid, staring at the door. Another knock, firmer this time. His throat went dry. He whispered to himself, "Don't answer. Don't answer." The knocks continued, slow and steady, like whoever or whatever stood on the other side knew he was inside, waiting. The phone remained black. No messages this time, no warning, no explanation. For nearly 5 minutes, the knocking persisted until finally it stopped. Silence filled the apartment again. Ethan didn't move for the rest of the night. He sat on the couch, wide-eyed, waiting for another sound. None came. When dawn broke, Ethan's body felt numb from sitting so long, but relief washed through him. He convinced himself it must have been a neighbor, maybe someone drunk who had knocked on the wrong door. He almost believed it, until he checked the hallway camera feed in the morning. The building's security system recorded each floor's hallways. Ethan requested last night's footage from the landlord under the excuse that he had heard strange noises. The man grumbled, but obliged. On the grainy black and white footage, Ethan watched himself sitting on his couch through the small peephole camera above the door. At 11:37, 3 sharp knocks echoed, and his head turned toward the sound. He froze in place. But on the footage, no one was there. No one had knocked. The footage replayed over and over in Ethan's mind. Each time he watched the hallway video, the knocks echoed, his body reacted, his head snapped toward the door. But on the screen, nothing. No figure, no shadow, no movement. The hall remained empty the entire time. By the 5th viewing, Ethan's stomach churned. It wasn't just that no one had been there. It was that the sound had been perfectly real in the moment. He could still feel it reverberating through the floor and walls, rattling his chest as if someone stood just inches away on the other side of the wood. Yet the camera had captured nothing. Ethan shut his laptop, his palms sweaty. Maybe the camera had malfunctioned. Maybe the feed dropped frames. He wanted to believe that. He wanted to cling to any rational explanation, no matter how thin. But when he checked the footage from earlier in the evening, neighbors walking past, deliveries arriving, the landlord himself locking up the mailroom. The feed was perfectly smooth. Only during those 5 minutes did the world go blank. By the time Ethan left for work that morning, exhaustion hung over him like a fog. He nearly missed his train. In the office, his manager commented on his pale complexion and bloodshot eyes. He blamed it on a stomach bug. The day passed slowly, filled with jittery moments where he swore people were watching him. A coworker glanced too long at his phone. A man on the train stared openly, only to look away when Ethan met his eyes. The world seemed suddenly full of hidden intentions. At 6 p.m., he trudged back toward his apartment, dread already pooling in his chest. He didn't want to go back. But where else could he go? By the time night fell, he sat in the dark again, every light off, curtains drawn. The phone lay face up on the coffee table, its black screen reflecting his pale face. He tried to distract himself with music, with the faint comfort of his favorite playlist. But as 11:37 approached, the songs seemed hollow, tinny, as if the sound itself had been drained of warmth. At the exact second, the phone lit up. The timestamp, August 18th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message, "Do not look in the mirror tomorrow night." Ethan swallowed hard. His apartment had 2 mirrors, one in the bathroom, one by the entryway. Both ordinary, both harmless. But the weight of the message pressed down on him. He tried to laugh it off, to mutter to himself that it was nothing. Just data, just pixels on a screen. Yet he already knew he wouldn't dare glance into either mirror when tomorrow night came. That night, sleep finally overtook him, but it wasn't restful. He dreamed of his own reflection, except it wasn't quite him. Its mouth lagged a second behind when he spoke. Its eyes lingered too long, following him even after he looked away. He woke drenched in sweat, heart racing. The following day, Ethan forced himself into a routine. Work, coffee, emails, small talk. He tried to appear normal, but the words from the phone pulsed in the back of his skull. He avoided reflective surfaces instinctively, even sidestepping the polished glass doors of the office building. His coworkers noticed his jumpiness. Someone asked if he'd been having nightmares. Yes, he thought. Nightmares that are leaking into the day. By the time evening came, his anxiety had reached a fever pitch. He taped a towel over the bathroom mirror and threw a bedsheet across the entryway one. He didn't want to risk even a glance. His reflection, once an everyday companion, now felt like a predator waiting to pounce. When 11:37 neared, he sat rigid on the couch again, staring at the phone. It lit up. Timestamp, August 19th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message, "Someone will try to convince you this isn't real. Don't believe them." Ethan's stomach dropped. Was someone going to confront him? A friend? A neighbor? Or was this a threat that the very world around him would try to gaslight him into disbelief? He set the phone down, trembling. The apartment was so quiet he could hear the faint hum of the streetlights outside, the distant thrum of traffic. And then, from the bathroom, a sound broke the silence. A soft creak. His body stiffened. The towel he had taped across the mirror rustled, as if stirred by a breath. Ethan rose, step by hesitant step, until he stood outside the bathroom door. The sound ceased. He reached for the light switch with a shaking hand and flicked it. The bathroom was empty. The towel still hung across the mirror. But for one terrible moment, Ethan thought he saw movement beneath the fabric, something shifting, pressing forward, then retreating. He slammed the door shut and locked it. That night, he didn't sleep at all. The next morning, August 18th, he looked in the bathroom only long enough to splash water on his face without glancing up. He didn't brush his teeth in front of the mirror. He didn't dare. He left the apartment as quickly as possible. The day was gray, the air heavy with humidity. On the train, he clutched the phone in his pocket, though he didn't check it. He didn't want to see anything. Not until he had to. At work, his coworker Michelle cornered him near the break room. "You okay?" she asked gently. Honestly, you look awful." Ethan forced a thin smile. "Bad sleep. That's all." She tilted her head. Sometimes when we're stressed, our brains make up things. Hallucinations. Sounds, shadows, even words on screens. I had an uncle who, her voice cut through him like a blade. Someone will try to convince you this isn't real. The phone's warning burned in his mind. Ethan backed away from her mid-sentence, muttering something about needing to take a call. Michelle frowned, confused, as he hurried off. His heart raced. The phone had predicted this. It knew she would try to explain it away. But how? By the time he reached home, Ethan felt trapped between two worlds. Either the phone was showing him genuine glimpses of the future, or it was warping his mind so badly that coincidence itself felt like prophecy. As night fell, he turned off every light and sat in the dark again. His breathing came shallow, uneven. His eyes kept flicking to the towel-covered mirror in the bathroom door. He wondered if the thing behind it, whatever it was still waiting for him to slip. At 11:37, the phone lit up again. Timestamp: August 20th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: you will see what's following you. Ethan's chest constricted. Following him? Had it already been trailing him? Was it in the corners of his vision, in the gaps between blinks? He thought of the man in the elevator, the stairs on the train, the shifting towel over the mirror. He turned the phone face down, refusing to read it again. He didn't want to know. He didn't want tomorrow to come. But he knew it would, whether he wanted it or not. That night, sleep never came. Each creak of the building made him jolt upright, heart hammering. He thought he heard footsteps pacing the hall outside his door, stopping just short of knocking. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the silence felt even worse. When the sun finally rose, Ethan realized something terrifying. He hadn't checked the clock once during the night. Time itself had blurred, stretched, and fractured. Hours felt like seconds. Seconds felt like hours. His body was unraveling under the strain. At work on August 19th, he barely managed to function. He spilled coffee across his desk, snapped at a coworker, and nearly missed an important client call. His boss pulled him aside, warning him that he needed rest, or else. Ethan nodded numbly, but he knew rest was impossible. On the way home, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At first, it was subtle, an itch at the back of his neck. But then, reflected in the darkened windows of the train, he thought he saw a second figure standing just behind him, too close, though the seats were empty. When he turned, nothing. When he looked again, there it was, just a faint blur, a suggestion of a person-shaped shadow clinging to his reflection. He pressed his eyes shut until the train screeched to a stop. Back in his apartment, he closed every curtain, locked every door, and shoved a chair beneath the doorknob. The shadows in the corners seemed to breathe, stretching deeper when he wasn't looking directly at them. At 11:37, his phone glowed once more. Timestamp: August 21st, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: don't let it in. His breath caught. The word struck him harder than any before. The phone wasn't warning him about vague dangers anymore. It was warning him about something specific, something that wanted inside. For the rest of that night, Ethan sat frozen, his eyes locked on the door, waiting for the sound he dreaded most, a knock. And when it finally came, soft and deliberate, his phone stayed utterly silent. The knock echoed once, twice, then fell into silence. Ethan's breath hitched, his chest tightening until every inhale felt like broken glass. He stared at the door, the chair braced beneath the knob, the flimsy wood between him and whatever waited on the other side. His phone lay face up on the table, the message glaring at him, "Don't let it in." He whispered the words like a mantra, as though repeating them would make them true. Another knock, this one sharper. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. He tried to imagine it was nothing, some lost neighbor again, maybe even a prank. But deep down he knew better. The hall camera footage from before had shown nothing. Whoever or whatever was knocking didn't belong to the hallway or the building. It came from elsewhere. Minutes dragged by. The knocking eventually stopped, but Ethan didn't move from the couch. He sat frozen, barely daring to blink, until dawn's faint light leaked through the curtains. When he finally stood, his legs trembled, as though he'd aged 20 years overnight. That morning, August 20th, Ethan called in sick. He couldn't face work, Couldn't face the train or the stairs or the mirrors in the office bathroom. He spent the day pacing his apartment, drinking cup after cup of stale coffee just to stay upright. Every creak of the building made his heart jolt. Every passing car's headlights cast warped shadows across his walls, shadows that lingered half a beat too long. He told himself he wouldn't look at the phone. He would leave it in the drawer, bury it under old receipts, forget about it until the cursed time came and went. But the drawers seemed to hum with a presence. He couldn't focus on anything else. By mid-afternoon, he found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor, the phone clutched in his palm, as though its weight alone anchored him to reality. At 11:37 that night, the glow came again. Timestamp: August 22nd, 2025, 11:37 p.m. Message: it will call your name tomorrow night. Don't answer. Ethan's stomach turned. The idea of a knock was bad enough, but a voice? A voice speaking his name from the other side of the door, or worse, from within his own apartment? He tossed the phone aside, his breath shallow. The glow of the screen continued to burn against the darkness, as though mocking him. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time he began to doze, he swore he heard faint whispers brushing against his ear. When he snapped awake, the room was empty. By morning, he looked worse than ever. His skin had gone pale and waxy, his eyes hollowed by deep shadows. He considered leaving the city altogether, just packing a bag and running. But the thought chilled him further. What if the phone's warnings followed him wherever he went? What if running only made it angry? At work that day, his co-workers avoided him. Michelle barely met his eyes. The man from the elevator, the one with the hollow stare, was in the lobby when Ethan returned home, standing perfectly still as though waiting. Ethan didn't even try to take the elevator. He bolted for the stairs, lungs burning as he climbed 9 flights without pause. When he reached his apartment, he slammed the door, bolted it, shoved the chair beneath the knob again, and collapsed against the wall. All day he waited, dreading nightfall, dreading the moment the phone would prove, once again, that tomorrow wasn't his to control. When 11:37 finally arrived, he already knew what was coming. The phone lit up as always. Timestamp: August 23rd, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message: you won't recognize yourself in the morning. Ethan's throat tightened. He stumbled to the bathroom, ripping the towel down from the mirror in one violent motion. For a second, he almost believed nothing had changed. His reflection stared back, gaunt but still him. But then the reflection's lips curved into a smile. Ethan's mouth did not. He reeled back, crashing into the wall. His reflection kept smiling, its head cocking slightly, eyes glinting with a mockery of life. No, Ethan whispered. No, this isn't real. But the reflection mouthed back the words, yes it is. He threw the towel over the glass again, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. Then he stumbled back into the living room, his knees buckling beneath him. The phone buzzed. Not at 11:37, but at 12:01 a.m. A new message had appeared, though this time the timestamp didn't show tomorrow's date. It read simply, "Did you see me?" Ethan hurled the phone across the room. It struck the wall with a dull crack, falling to the carpet. The screen remained intact, glowing faintly in the dark like a single unblinking eye. For the rest of the night, Ethan sat in the corner of the living room, arms wrapped tight around his knees, rocking back and forth. He didn't check the phone again. He didn't dare. By morning, his reflection's smile haunted him. When he finally washed his face in the sink, he kept his eyes closed, refusing to look at the mirror. He dressed in silence, moving through the motions like a ghost. At work, Michelle approached again, softer this time, almost fearful. "You need help," she whispered. "Whatever's happening, you can't do this alone." Ethan stared at her, trembling. He wanted to tell her everything. The messages, the knocks, the voice in the mirror. But the phone's warning rang louder in his skull. Someone will try to convince you this isn't real. Don't believe them. He shook his head and walked away. That night, August 22nd, he waited again. His apartment felt like a coffin now, each wall pressing tighter, the air stale and thin. At 11:37, the phone glowed once more. Timestamp: August 24th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: if you look behind you tomorrow night, you won't survive. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He clutched the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. He didn't want tomorrow to come. He didn't want another prophecy. But time was merciless. The next night, as the cursed minute neared, Ethan sat in his living room, eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look left or right. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of something metallic, something faintly sweet. At 11:37 exactly, the knock came again. But this time it wasn't at the door. It was behind him. 3 slow, deliberate raps against the wall. Ethan's whole body convulsed. His instincts screamed to turn, to look. But the message echoed louder. If you look behind you tomorrow night, you won't survive. He stayed frozen, every muscle screaming, tears streaking down his face as the knocks continued. Louder now, closer, as though crawling toward him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Ethan collapsed forward onto the carpet, gasping for breath. He didn't move until dawn. When the sun rose, he dared to check behind him. The wall bore no marks, no dents. But the carpet was disturbed, dragged in faint, uneven lines, as though something heavy had been crawling just inches from where he'd sat. His phone buzzed. A new message. Timestamp: August 25th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. You can't keep ignoring me. The message burned on the screen long after Ethan set the phone down. You can't keep ignoring me. It wasn't phrased like the others. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement, almost scolding, almost personal. Whoever, or whatever, was sending these messages no longer wanted to protect him. It wanted acknowledgement. Ethan shoved the phone into a drawer, slamming it shut, his breath ragged. He whispered to himself that he wouldn't check it again. He couldn't. Every message dragged him deeper. Every prediction carved another crack into his sanity. But the drawer vibrated faintly against the wood of the desk. A subtle hum, almost like a heartbeat. By 3 a.m., Ethan ripped the drawer open, snatched the phone, and stared at the dark screen, waiting. Nothing. He turned it over, pressed the buttons, swiped the glass. Still nothing. He almost convinced himself he'd imagined it, until he sat on the table and walked to the bathroom. The moment he closed the door, the faint buzz rattled through the apartment again. Ethan pressed his back against the wall, his chest tightening. The phone wasn't just showing him things anymore. It was demanding his attention. The following morning, August 24th, Ethan didn't leave his apartment. He ignored calls from work. His email piled up unanswered. He couldn't face the outside world when the inside was already crumbling. By late afternoon, his food was gone. He eyed the empty cupboards, debating whether to venture out. But every time he reached for his keys, his hand faltered. What if the messages followed him outside again? What if the shadow from the train window returned, clearer this time? So he stayed inside, hungry, jittery, pacing. When the cursed minute approached that night, he already knew what he'd see. At 11:37, the glow filled the room. Timestamp: August 26th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: tomorrow night you'll understand what I am. Ethan's throat closed. His hands shook violently, nearly dropping the phone. The words weren't a warning. They were a promise. He whispered, No, I don't want to know. I don't. But deep down, he knew he would have no choice. That night, the dreams came heavier. He saw the hallway outside his door stretching into infinity, lined with doors identical to his own. At the far end, something stood, a shadow with no face, its limbs bending wrong, its head twitching like a broken puppet. It raised its hand and knocked on one of the doors. Ethan jolted awake, the sound still echoing in his skull. When daylight came, it didn't bring relief. The walls of his apartment seemed closer than before, the corners darker, the silence heavier. He wanted to run, but knew there was nowhere to go. He lasted the day by pacing, muttering to himself, gripping the phone in his pocket like a talisman. He refused to check it until the moment came, convinced that if he peeked early, the prophecy would spiral out of control. When night arrived, Ethan sat in the center of his living room floor, cross-legged, the phone in front of him like an idol. At 11:37, the glow came. Timestamp: August 27th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: look at the wall. Ethan's stomach twisted. He didn't want to. He couldn't. But his head turned anyway, against his will, as if invisible hands guided his neck. The far wall of his apartment trembled, subtle at first, then harder as though something pressed from the other side. The drywall bowed inward, faint cracks splintering across the paint. Ethan scrambled backward, heart racing. Then in the center of the wall, a bulge formed, an outline, vaguely human-shaped, pressing forward. Fingers, shoulders, a distorted head. Ethan's phone buzzed again. A second message appeared instantly, though this one had no timestamp. That's me. He choked on a scream. The wall pulsed, the figure straining closer, the surface warping like thin fabric. No, stay out. Ethan shouted, clutching the phone. The wall stilled. The outline flattened. The silence returned. For a long time, Ethan didn't move. He stayed curled against the opposite wall, staring at the spot until the first gray hints of dawn seeped into the room. By morning, the cracks remained, faint but undeniable. Ethan pressed his hand against the wall. Cold, solid, but not unchanged. That day, he finally left the apartment, if only out of desperation. His stomach growled, his cupboards bare. He shuffled to the corner store, flinching at every face he passed. The clerk eyed him nervously as he piled canned food and bottled water on the counter, hands trembling so hard he nearly dropped them. On the way back, he caught his reflection in a storefront window. He almost kept walking, but something in the glass caught him. His reflection wasn't in sync. It blinked a second late. Ethan stumbled backward, heart hammering. A man on the sidewalk bumped into him, muttered an irritated curse, and kept walking. Ethan didn't care. He stared at the reflection until it finally matched his movements again, a half-smile lingering on its lips. Back in his apartment, he shoved every mirror, every reflective surface into closets or covered them with sheets. The distorted smile burned in his brain. By the time night fell, he sat trembling on the couch, the cracks in the wall glaring at him like veins spreading from a wound. At 11:37, the phone lit up. Timestamp: August 28th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: tomorrow you'll let me in. Ethan screamed, throwing the phone across the room. It landed face up, the glow unblinking. He tore at his hair, pacing in frantic circles, muttering, No, I won't. But the words felt hollow. The cracks in the wall seemed deeper now, the bulge more distinct, as though whatever lingered beyond the surface already knew the truth. For the rest of the night, Ethan didn't sit. He didn't sleep. He stood guard, staring at the wall, the phone glowing faintly beside him. Dawn came like a false promise, the light doing nothing to ease the tension. August 27th stretched endlessly. Ethan didn't eat, didn't drink. He simply watched the wall, certain that by the time night fell, it would no longer hold. And when 11:37 finally came again, he held the phone tight, heart thrumming so violently he thought it might tear free from his chest. The screen lit. Timestamp: August 29th, 2025. 11:37 p.m. The message: you're almost ready. The wall cracked louder this time. And this time, Ethan didn't scream. He just sat there, hollow-eyed, staring at the bulging surface as dust sprinkled to the floor. The phone buzzed again, though the timestamp this time read something new. Not tomorrow. August 29th, 2025. 11:38 p.m. 1 minute into the future. The message read, I'm already inside. The words glowed across the screen like a wound. I'm already inside. Ethan dropped the phone as though it had burned him. It clattered across the carpet, face up, the letters glaring in the dark. His chest heaved, each breath sharp and ragged. No, he whispered. No, you're not. You're not. But even as he said it, he felt the apartment shift. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. The corners of the room seemed darker, stretching farther than they should. The silence carried a weight, a presence, as though the space wasn't empty anymore. He stumbled to the kitchen, fumbling through drawers for anything to defend himself. His fingers closed around a rusted kitchen knife. He gripped it tight, his knuckles bone white. From the living room, the phone buzzed. Ethan froze. It buzzed again. He forced himself back into the room, knife raised. The phone still lay on the carpet, glowing faintly. A new message had appeared. Put the knife down. That won't help you. Ethan's stomach turned. He hadn't typed anything. He hadn't spoken. How did it know? He hurled the knife across the room. It clanged against the wall and dropped uselessly to the floor. He pressed both hands to his skull, rocking, muttering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." The phone buzzed again. "It is real, and you know it." His eyes burned. His hands trembled. He wanted to smash the phone, to crush it beneath his heel, to end the nightmare. But some deep, gnawing instinct told him it wouldn't matter. The messages would find another way. That night stretched into a blur of shadows and whispers. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps pacing behind him. Sometimes he caught his reflection in the black glass of the TV screen, moving just a second too slow. When dawn finally came, Ethan collapsed onto the couch, shivering under the weak sunlight. But the sunlight no longer felt safe. It seemed thin, artificial, unable to chase away what lurked with him. By noon, he couldn't take it anymore. He stumbled from his apartment, blinking at the harsh daylight outside. People on the street glanced at him. He must have looked like a wreck, hair wild, clothes stained with sweat. But their glances lingered too long, their eyes too flat, too blank. Were they people? He ducked into a diner, desperate for food, for noise, for something to drown out the suffocating silence of his apartment. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, the hiss of the grill. It was almost comforting. But when the waitress set a plate in front of him, Ethan froze. On the surface of his water glass, his reflection grinned. His real face did not. He shoved the glass away, knocking it to the floor where it shattered. The other diners turned to stare, their expressions stiff, frozen, like masks that hadn't been painted with emotions yet. Ethan bolted. He ran into the street, heart hammering, until he collapsed against the brick wall of an alley. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Timestamp: August 30th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message: "You can't run from yourself." He dropped the phone, backing away until his shoulders hit the alley wall. The device lay in the dirt, glowing faintly. A new message appeared without him touching it. "Pick me up." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, refusing. But his hands moved anyway. Slowly, against his will, his fingers curled around the phone and lifted it. "Good." The words appeared instantly, as though waiting for him. That night, he didn't bother locking the door. Didn't bother covering the mirrors. It didn't matter anymore. The thing wasn't outside, it was inside. Inside the walls, inside the reflections, inside him. At 11:37, the glow filled the apartment once more. Timestamp: August 31st, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message: "Tomorrow night, you'll see me fully." Ethan laughed then, a dry, broken laugh that echoed off the cracked walls. His mind felt like glass, thin and ready to shatter. He whispered to the empty room, "Fine. Show me. Just show me and get it over with." The phone buzzed immediately. Not yet. Soon. The hours that followed blurred together. He drifted in and out of sleep, plagued by visions of endless hallways, faceless figures, his own reflection peeling its skin away like paper. He woke gasping, his sheets soaked with sweat, the cracks in the wall spreading wider. By morning, the wall bulged more than ever. Dust littered the carpet beneath it. Something pulsed behind the surface, a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. He couldn't eat, couldn't think. He just sat and watched the wall all day waiting. When 11:37 came, he already knew. Timestamp: September 1st, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message: "Stand up. Turn around." Ethan's breath caught. His body refused to move. The phone buzzed again. Now, his muscles ached with tension. Slowly, against his will, he rose from the couch. His head turned. Behind him the shadow stood. It wasn't human. Not fully. It had his outline, his frame, his posture. but its face was blurred, shifting, as though 1,000 different expressions flickered at once. Its eyes were black voids, yet within them he thought he saw the faint glow of a phone screen. Ethan staggered backward, his voice caught in his throat. The phone buzzed again in his hand. "Say hello." The shadow tilted its head, waiting. Ethan's lips trembled. He forced out a hoarse whisper. "Hello." The shadow smiled. The wall cracked wide open. Dust rained down. The bulge split into jagged seams, a deep blackness yawning behind it. The shadow stepped closer, one hand reaching out, its fingers stretching too long, too thin. The phone buzzed again. "Tomorrow night will be one." Ethan's scream tore through the apartment. The scream that ripped from Ethan's throat didn't sound like his own. It was raw, jagged, an animal's cry torn from deep inside. But the shadow only smiled wider, its black eyes flickering like static, its elongated fingers twitching as if eager to reach him. The cracks in the wall stretched farther, splintering like a spider web across the plaster. Behind them was no insulation, no brick, just blackness. A void. And within that void, something pulsed, steady and deep, a rhythm that synced with Ethan's pounding heartbeat. He staggered backward, clutching the phone so tightly it dug into his palm. The screen glowed. September 2nd, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message, "It's time." Ethan shook his head violently. No, I'm not ready. I'm not." The phone buzzed again, cutting him off. "You've always been ready. You bought me. You brought me here. You wanted this." Tears streaked Ethan's cheeks. His knees buckled, collapsing him onto the carpet. I didn't know." The shadow crouched in front of him, mirroring his posture, its head cocked at the same angle. For a moment, Ethan had the sickening sense he was staring at himself through a warped mirror, one that showed not who he was but who he might become. The phone buzzed once more. "Say yes." Ethan's lips trembled. He wanted to scream no, to hurl the phone, to deny it all. But the words wouldn't come. His mouth moved against his will, whispering, "Yes." The shadow's grin split impossibly wide. The wall burst open. A roar of silence spilled through the apartment, louder than any noise, an emptiness so profound it rattled Ethan's bones. The shadow reached forward, its hands slipping into his chest, not tearing, not breaking, but sinking through as though his flesh were nothing but water. Ethan convulsed, his vision blurred. The phone buzzed one final time in his hand. Now we're the same. And then everything went dark. When Ethan woke, sunlight streamed through the window. For one blissful second, he thought it had all been a dream. The wall looked whole again. The cracks were gone. The air smelled fresh, almost sweet. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His phone rested neatly on the coffee table. No cracks, no scratches. He reached for it with trembling fingers. The screen lit. No messages. No timestamps. No evidence of anything that had happened. He laughed shakily, the sound fragile but real. Maybe it had all been in his head. A psychotic break. A hallucination brought on by stress. He could get help. He could explain it away. But when he stood and walked to the bathroom, he froze. The mirror was uncovered. He didn't remember taking the towel down. Slowly, he lifted his eyes. His reflection stared back, calm and composed. Same hair, same hollow eyes, same pale skin. But when he turned to leave, the reflection didn't move. It stayed smiling. The phone buzzed in his hand. September 3rd, 2025, 11:37 p.m. "Hello, Ethan." His reflection mouthed the same words. That day passed in a haze. Ethan barely remembered eating, barely remembered walking outside. People smiled at him on the street. Too many smiles, too wide, too empty. He couldn't tell if they were neighbors, strangers, or reflections come alive. Every window glared with faces that didn't quite match his movements. Every puddle shimmered with something just a fraction too slow. By the time night came, Ethan had stopped resisting. He sat calmly in the center of his apartment, the phone resting in his lap, the mirror uncovered across from him. At 11:37, the screen lit one last time. September 4th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. The message, "From tomorrow onward, you'll be me." Ethan smiled faintly, though his lips hadn't moved. His reflection was already grinning. The glow of the phone spread brighter, flooding the room until everything dissolved into pale white. The next morning, Michelle knocked on Ethan's door. No answer. She tried again, frowning. He hadn't been to work in days, and something in her gut told her this wasn't just stress. She called his name, pressing her ear to the wood. Silence. She sighed, shaking her head, and turned to leave when her phone buzzed. A new notification banner slid across the screen. New message, September 5th, 2025, 11:37 p.m. Her breath caught. She didn't recognize the number. The message preview read only one word, hello. Michelle froze, staring at the glow in her hand. Inside Ethan's apartment, unseen behind the door, the mirror rippled faintly. A figure lingered within it, smiling, waiting.